Hello, everyone, and happy Friday to you. Welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And if it's your first time tuning in, do me a favor. Head over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And as always, I am Tony Lynch. I'm your host. Now, before we get started, I need to let you know that this is for educational purposes only. But as always, we guys are bringing you some amazing people, and today we have another amazing guest for you guys. We got Tina Fornwald. Let me just make sure so she don't come up here and beat me up and everything, because y'all know how I do. I can slaughter somebody's name. We got Tina Fornwald, and she is an amazing woman with an amazing story. So she's coming in. She's an ex-military veteran. So big ups to her. So if you guys have any questions or comments for her, please put them in the comments section. Now, she has also survived breast cancer and she survived spousal loss. So without further ado, I'm going to bring over on my guest, and we're going to get this thing started, guys. So sit back and enjoy. Tina, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing today, Tony?
I am doing well. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Of course. So now, before we get started, tell people who you are and where you're from.
I will say he did pronounce my last name right on the second round. So
you know what? That's my story, because I was trying to pick a fight. You never know me sometimes, okay?
So I will say yes to that. I am originally from Chicago, Illinois. I am one of 5 siblings, so that means I am from the hood. And so you see the foundation that I am the founder of Widowhood Real Talk with Tina. Hood to me means family. And my family and I, that is the most important relationship in my life. I served 21 years in the United States Army. I'm a retired warrant officer from the military. I am a project manager with the civil service, and my passion and how I am showing up in the world and serving others is through my foundation, Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, supporting the bereaved in this world, because we need people to sit with us that can understand and help us develop a life that we enjoy instead of just existing in our grief.
I love it, man. And also, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for the work that you do, and for everyone that you serve, and thank you most importantly for your service into the military, because without the ladies and men that are serving for us, we wouldn't have the freedoms that we are. So I appreciate your service. Now, before we, with that being said, you've had one hell of a journey in this world. And so let's talk about who Tina was before everything came, and we talked a little bit about it. I've been on your show before. So
yes.
You guys haven't already, real quick shout out. What's the name of your podcast?
The podcast is the same as our foundation, Widowhood Real Talk with Tina. It is found on any place where you find podcasts, our YouTube channel, our website, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It's on 15 different podcasting applications. So if you are looking for a podcast in conjunction with Tony's, as far as providing hope, healing, and encouragement as it relates to grief, I think you will find the product and what the services and what we provide are very helpful.
You guys go over there, show her love, show her and support her channel, and let her know that Tony sent you over there. We always like to make sure that our guests know where they're coming from and where you heard from them, and you guys enjoy. I was on the show, amazing guest. Enjoy talking with her, and you guys are going to enjoy her conversations as well as her episodes as well. So now we're going to go back a little bit. Let's talk about who you were before you got into the work, right? Because we always have that before,
yes,
during, and then we always have the after, right? So take us through that journey of who you were before the Army, before the husband, before everything else, right?
Ooh, we're going way. So I entered the military at 18. So my mother birthed me, raised in Chicago. I am one of 5 siblings. Our dad was a police officer in Chicago, Illinois. So there was a lot of structure in my family. So going into the military was an easy shift. we grew up in Chicago, so there's no punks, we say, on Wallace Street. That's where I grew up, on 126 of Wallace, on the south side of Chicago. And one of the things that I found interesting as far as growing up in Chicago, that what I learned there served me through the rest of my life. The ability to be able to endure harsh situations, the ability to be able to think quickly on my mind, to have to catch the city bus to make it to school, to navigate, to get around the city, were things that some people may be afraid of, but I found to be very helpful. And I was able to use those skills and cultivate them to be the person that I am today.
I love that. Now, I do have to ask though, because I've been through Chicago a couple times. I got a pretty good, decent reputation out there. That's why I won't ever go back. But I digress. I'm not gonna talk about those times. But Chicago, right? How was Chicago back then compared to where it is now?
For me, it felt like a safe place. I knew my community. We lived, our house, my parents' home was on the corner of the block. And if we were out in the street, like if my parents turned on the light on their porch, no matter where I was, I could hear the echo, Tina, your porch light's on, you got to come home. And so my siblings, we would all come back to the house because, you have to come home. My mom was a stay-at-home mother. I would go to school, but I would come home in the midst of the day and come home and have lunch and then walk back to school. The grammar school that I attended was literally 2 blocks from where I resided. So family was an important part of my lifestyle. With 5 siblings, if somebody you didn't like, you always had somebody else that you could acquiesce to. There were always relationships. So if my parents, we were on punishment, we had to stay in the house. It was like, okay, there's enough of us here that we're going to be fine. So life was good for me. The decision to go into the military is because I really, at that point, did not know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to just kick it in the streets. I wanted to find out what was on this world that I was watching on television. I wanted to expand beyond just seeing it. I wanted to be a part of what it was in the entire world. And the military gave me that opportunity to take the skills that I had learned as a young child and leverage them that actually propelled me for the rest of my life.
No. Going into the military, how was that journey? Because I come from a military family. I've never gone into the military myself, but I've heard the stories. Boot camp, all of those things. And my family that went into the military, they're all crazy, right? They went insane. At least that's what I think. Anyway, I think they went insane, and something happened while they were in there, and they came out, and then they were like, you know what, we beat up all the nephews and nieces now. And I was like, hold on, this is not the way this works. I'm gonna tell grandma, right? you know how that goes. I'm telling grandma, you're not just gonna beat up on me. And grandma was like, boy, you better toughen up. And I was like, no.
So I come from a military family also. My youngest sister was in the Marines. Our middle sister retired from the Navy. Our dad was in the Air Force. Both of my children served in the Navy. I won't hold that against them. Go Army. And a slew of other uncles and cousins and grandparents that served in the military. So serving in the military is a rich tradition in our family. So when I hear the word patriot, I think of people in my family who have served this country, who have put on that uniform, who have stood in war in times of conflict and served this country against other threats. So going in the military for me was an easy choice. I remember I was actually just sharing this story with a friend a while back. Going into basic training, you get off this bus, this scrawny little kid from Chicago, you have this rucksack on, and people are just being yelled at. They're trying to acclimate you to military life. They're trying to get you into formation for the first time, and they're yelling, and they're screaming, and they're demanding. And what I noticed, they weren't hitting you. They were standing this close and they were yelling. You could smell their breath and, spit. But I was like, I've taken more than this on a regular day from my dad in Chicago. I could I could do this all day. So the yelling wasn't a thing for me. They was like, get down and give me push-ups. Because I knew I was going into the military, I started practicing doing push-ups and running. So that was easy for me, which allowed me to serve in a little leadership position in basic training, learning how to march. It was about being disciplined. It was about forming a group. Once again, those are things that I had done in my youth. Being one of 5 siblings, we operated as a unit. To this day, when my children or nieces will talk, they call us the siblings. We are a fine-tuned group. You mentioned before, like when I went through breast cancer, my siblings leaned in everything that was needed. They were taking care of that. So the group mentality and operating, covering someone's back, being aware of what's going on was something that I was familiar with. So the being in the military was fine. Basic training, you're learning how to operate weapons. You're learning how to learn different military jargon, learning how to stay safe in a threat, and just learning all the different things that would make you a good soldier. My military career progressed over the years. I did 5.5 years of active duty. The remaining of my 21 years was served in the Army Reserves. And I am grateful for the people that I've served with. I still am in contact with many people today that I served in the military with. I was stationed in Korea for 18 months. I met my late husband in the military. It was a lifestyle that served me well. I could not say what it looks like now because I've not been in the military, but I do hear that there are things where they tell you if you're stressed out, then you can hand somebody a stress card and they won't yell at you, or they'll do different things to not apply as much pressure as I experienced, because I am 57. So when I was in the military in 84, it was a different world. But I feel it's just like anything in life. If it's something that you have put your mind to do and you are determined to be successful, and you reach out to people that can encourage you or give you guidance and insight to whatever it is you're experiencing, that more than likely you will come out on the other side of that successful. There may be some bumps and bruises. There may be some pain, some scars, but overall you would have been able to complete what it is you went to do.
Nice. I do love that. It kind of, you saying that kind of took me back to something. And if you're a sibling, we all know how this works out, right? You know, it's like if you're the oldest one, we were the ones that the parents experimented on. So you know what I'm saying? There's no blueprint to raise no child, right? You know what I'm saying? So we the ones, oh yeah, you want to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Here's a punch in the jaw, punk. You know, go sit down, right? You know, you're not gonna be home before the street lights come home. I bet you I'll get you with this flip flop.
Now, coming home, now I have a sister that's older than me, so she got more of the experiment. I was coming in after her.
That's what I mean.
So pretty much
what I mean. Like, so,
yes.
You know, I mean, but you was also in the military back, and so I heard stories. I heard the stories, and I know what they're talking about. And you know, back then, the military was the military. If you had to go, you ain't had no excuse. You better go do it. If you need to go run 5,000 miles, you better get it done before the nightfall. Right? Literally. You know, all those different things. Nowadays, you know, you got safe spaces and you got cards. So that's why I said it was like you was the one that they experimented on, and then somebody came along and was like, we can't do that no more.
Not at all. Not at all.
So and you know, and it sounds like, you know, like that's where your life had changed. You met your late husband.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, Mark.
Yes.
Yes. So how long had you been in before you had met Mark?
I joined the military in 84, went away to boot camp, and I met Mark in 85, 86. He actually met him at my first duty station in Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland.
Okay. Shout out to Maryland. You know, your family out there as well. Yeah. And how was that? I mean, because now you've met him, and life is going pretty good so far. You guys are in the military, so you guys got that going on. So I can kind of see life actually going in a good direction.
So I'll give you a little bit of story about our first date. Well, actually, let me go back a little bit to how Mark and I met. We lived in the barracks, and at that time, it was on one side of the building were females, and the other side were males. There was literally just a blinding door that would just go back and flipping door, and you could go back and forth on the sides. And one of the guys was showing the movies in his room, and just a group of us were in there together. And I was in there, and then I had to go to the restroom and came back, and people rotated, and then I would happen to be sitting next to Mark. And he was the same height as me, and I'm 5'9", and I've always wanted somebody that was going to be taller. So I really was not interested in him. But we started talking, and the conversation seemed interesting. Then a few weeks later, some friends were going out to the movies, and I just asked him would he go to the movies with me. He thought it was going to be just the two of us, but it was an entire group of people going together. Mm-hmm. But afterwards, we went to get some pizza at Pizza Hut. And we were talking, and the conversation was very interesting. Then I went to the restroom. I go to the restroom a lot. Went to the restroom again. Don't we all? And I came back, and he was staring at me really hard. And I was like, okay, he's feeling me. And I get close to him. He goes, "You have toilet paper on your shoe." And I was like, okay. I was like, okay, so this is probably the last date that we're going to have, because I was he wasn't looking at me for the right reasons. but
hey, you couldn't tell. You was like, shoot.
I know. I was walking my walk and doing my thing. Yes.
Got that walk going on, you know what I'm saying? I bet you in the back of your head you had your own little theme music.
Yes, literally. You know how I know. I was doing all that, and then it went to wonk, 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 wonk. But things worked out. I think we were dating about 6 to 9 months. I received orders to Korea, and we stayed in contact. He received orders to go to Honduras. And then when I came back to the States, after about a year, we then got married. We eloped to Florida and told our parents the next day. Mark is European, white, last name Fornwald. And it just wasn't the time to have this big wedding and just for everybody still just to understand this interracial marriage. We knew we wanted to be together. And that was really all that mattered. Everybody else could figure it out on the back end as far as we were concerned. So we eloped in Florida. I remember we had matching shorts and a little outfit, and we were satisfied. I'd purchased a Dodge Colt and had a $500 rebate, and we used that for our honeymoon and just spent it traveling and visiting different friends and just enjoying ourselves.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, you guys eloped.
Yes.
Now, I find that actually really cool, right? And I'm a very traditional type guy. So when I do decide to get married, I'm do the whole wedding thing and things like that. But if not, you know, I mean, I'm all for eloping because I have a crazy sister, right? You know, and she's younger than me, but I'm afraid of her. So, but I won't tell her that, you know, because she'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna come," and then, you know, I'd be like, "No, we ain't got time for all that. We ain't got time for all that." So I may elope just to keep it a secret, and then just tell her, "Oh, by the way, you know, I got married." And then we're going to go from there. We'll see how it goes. I'm pretty sure it's not going to work out too well for me. But Florida, you would think Florida would be the place that you go to vacation, and Vegas would be the place that you go to elope. What made you want to go to Florida, right? You know,
Disney.
I'm not even, look, I'm done with you already. She said Disney.
It was Disney. He had some family member down there, and we wanted to visit. It was just a really cool place to go and hang out. We were in Florida. It was warm. We drove there from where we were residing in Virginia. It was an easy drive, and it just seemed like a nice place to go.
What part of Virginia was you in?
Actually, the same area that I reside in now. Returned to the Hampton Roads area.
And we talked about this.
Yes.
I told you that's my hometown.
Yes.
Newport News. I'm originally from Newport News, Virginia. So Hampton Roads area. Yep, that's where we're from. As a matter of fact, that's where my sister is and things like. So if you see her, tell her that I'm still being good. Okay.
Okay, I will.
Just tell her I'm still being good. That way, I don't have to worry about getting phone calls from her in the middle of the night threatening me and stuff. I ain't got time for all that. I'm too old for this.
Is she by the Church of Chicken in Newport News, or where is she at? Is she over there by that?
She, as a matter of fact, by the Church's Chicken in Newport News, right?
There we go. I know where it's at.
Because where she doesn't live too far from where Aqua Vista is. Okay, so where we grew up at, so I don't know how familiar you are with the area, but Aqua Vista, we used to live right across the street on 6th and Ivy. And when we were kids, across the street to Lincoln Park and go fishing and go swimming over there in the ocean. We used to go to little concerts because they got the little stage over there and everything. As a matter of fact, we just when I was out there a couple of years ago, we just did our family reunion right there in Lincoln Park. So I got family over in Kentucky Tuck, over in Hampton, over at all across Newport News in the Hampton area, and things like that. Richmond, Norfolk, all of those good little areas. I now do have to ask: do Smithfield still do the cow butchery?
My understanding, they do. When I lived here before, I graduated my undergrad in Christopher Newport University, so I lived in Newport News. My husband was a journeyman electrician for International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, 1340. Oh, wow. So that area, he probably went fishing exactly where you mentioned in that area. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh man, I used to love that. I used to love all of that. Now, you got married. When did you get diagnosed with breast cancer?
That was, let me see, around 2014, 15 timeline.
Now, how did that go? Because Mark was still alive at this
yes.
moment, right? Okay, so I just want to make sure I got my timelines right. Mm-hmm. And everything. Mark was still alive. You get diagnosed. What led up into that moment of being diagnosed, and take us back to that moment.
I went to have my regular mammogram. I started having mammograms at the age of 35, 40 because that's the thing that you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And let me say, if you are not having regular mammograms, you are doing yourself a disservice. It may be scary, it may be apprehensive, but take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. Please do your annual screenings. And if someone in your family was already diagnosed with breast cancer, then you have the ability to get it done sooner than later. You talk to your health professional and let them know which one of your family members were diagnosed with breast cancer. And there's different documentation to get you to start having mammograms sooner than 40. For me, I was having them every year. So it was just a routine thing. You go in every year, you get smashed, you get the paper back, and you go along with your life. Mm-hmm. This year, they called me and I was like, you're not supposed to call me. We're not supposed to talk. I mean, we talked when I was in there. Mm-hmm. And they told me that I had to come back to get some additional screening. And I asked a lot of questions, probably more than what they wanted at that initial part, to understand why they were calling me back. Mm-hmm. So Mark and I, the original exam, I went by myself. It was just something I did every year. When I had the call back, Mark went with me. And they told me what they saw, how many lumps there were, the different sizes of it, and what they perceived at that moment. Then from there, we had to then have a biopsy done, and we had to go to another facility, and literally they are taping you down, and they're using a very long needle, and they're extracting different cells out of your body. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it was myself, my husband, and a friend going. And the reason why I had a friend going with me is when you are the person that is not feeling well, it is important to have other people there that can write down notes, that can capture information. The sick person is not the person to take care of themselves. And at that point, I wasn't particularly feeling sick, but my mind was racing. My mind was thinking about my children. My mind was thinking about my life. My mind was thinking about what do I need to do if and what and all these other other different things. So I immediately enlisted different people to be in this process to make sure that somebody caught something I may have missed. So we have the biopsy, and then they called me back under the purpose of having the bandages removed. So I did not take Mark or my friend with me. I went by myself. Well, lo and behold, they had the full diagnosis, and they told me to come back, and they started talking, and they started telling me what the diagnosis was and asking me if I had questions. And I listened. I needed to get my emotions in check. I needed to get my head on tight, and I needed to listen very clearly to what they were telling me. And I asked them, could I have the paper that they were discussing? And they gave it to me. They asked me if I had any questions, and I said no. Questions were in my mind, but that was not where I was going to start fighting that battle of cancer. I needed to start fighting that battle when I got in the car and I started proclaiming the word of God of healing over myself. I needed to start proclaiming what my faith that I had stood up until that moment, that it needed to stand up in my life at that point. So I needed to, because I knew from that moment forward, the way that I was postured would dictate the way the rest of this journey would go. So I needed to ground myself. And for that reason, I'm glad that Mark and my friend was not there with me at that moment, because it allowed me to set the stage for how that would go forward. And so I went home and I told my husband, and I contacted my siblings and my children and gave them the diagnosis. And like I said, my siblings are, we activate as a unit. They immediately started researching questions that I needed to have at my first preliminary exam. They started researching the best cancer care facilities close to me. And within 24 hours, my siblings had a plan of what I needed to do the next day, because my mind was in a place, and I am grateful for them. And when I say questions, I'm talking 55 questions. I'm not talking 1, 2, 3. Between the four of them, they had put together the Q&A to give to any doctor. And I met with one physician. I sent him the questions in advance, and he was a good physician. It just didn't seem like it was going to be the best for me. I originally then went to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and that was a place where all my care was done. I was treated with radiation, and I am grateful in this process that my friends and family literally allowed me to create a list of who would pick me up and take me to treatment, because I had to go every day for like 8 weeks. And for Mark to have to take off from work and manage our children who were young at that time, it was just quite the wait. And so people literally came from around the world to where we were in Pennsylvania to take me to treatment. I was tired. The treatment was very exhausting. And I am grateful for the way that people showed up and just supported us and loved on us. And the breast cancer, I was able to go back to work, and then it started shifting that it was going towards uterine cancer, and I had to have an emergency hysterectomy, and I was just on the part of healing. So to have to go backwards to that, and that emergency hysterectomy took place in October of 2016.
There's a sequence of events that's going on right there, right? You know, first you get the one diagnosis no one wants to hear. You know, you have cancer. Then you have to go through treatment.
Yes.
Beautiful part about it is that you have your siblings, you have your husband, you have your children. That's a beautiful thing. I know a lot of people that don't.
Yes.
And you know, having a diagnosis like that can be very, very scary, because we often hear about the unfortunate aftermaths.
Yes.
Right. And so when you hear about those things, that can be a very scary situation if you don't have anyone to walk with you. So I definitely, you know, thankful that you had that. And then, you know, on top of that, you said something that I'm constantly, you know, when people ask me, you know, I tell them, you know, your faith, you know, whatever you believe in, whatever you can believe in. And if you don't believe in anything, you know, it's okay to grab onto someone else's belief system. If it makes you, you know, and until you can develop your own, right? I'm a firm believer in that. That's why that's one of the reasons why I don't talk a lot about things, because I see what people are, meet them where they are.
Yes.
I say, look, if what I believe in can inspire you and give you strength, hold on to it. You don't have to believe in everything I believe in 100%.
True.
Believe in those things that give you strength and that can inspire you, and hold on to that until you can learn how to breathe and develop your own. Make it yours, right? And when you said that, it just reminded me of that, because it takes faith, right? It takes really, really strong, a really strong belief system to not go backwards, to not shake your fist at life and go, I don't deserve this. It takes a lot to be able to do that. And that's inspiring. Thank you for the inspiration there.
You are welcome. I can tell you at that moment, it was surviving. It was me wanting to ground myself, because the greatest part of people recovering is your mindset. And if your fears and your anxieties overwhelm you and overtake you, that can impact your ability to heal and to recover and get stronger. And I wanted to get ahead of that and ground myself and ground my family, because they leaned into where I was at, and that allowed them to not fall apart, because they said they could see where I was and they wanted to meet me there.
See, and that's what I mean. Like that's inspiring, because I've met people. I've met people that fell apart, right? And sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't, right? And it all depends on the individual and the way life has treated them, right? So then, we can unpack those things right there. If a person's been beat up by life for so many times, and they get that diagnosis, they tired.
Yes.
Come on, you know how that is when you just
absolutely
tired of fighting, you're tired of the survival. You just think that if I could just get one more day, maybe everything will change around. And that one day comes, and it ain't nothing changed. It's just keep piling on top of you. Then after a while, you're just going, you know what? I don't know how much more of this I can take.
Exactly.
So when we can play that into that whole scenario, it changes the dynamic of how people will look at it. And I've seen people lose their faith too, right?
Absolutely.
Like, what I do to you? I've
Yes.
done it. Trust me, I know. I've been there and done that, right? But it's what came afterwards. And I'm glad you didn't give up. I'm glad for those other individuals who are tuning in right now. Thank you guys for not giving up either. And hopefully you guys are enjoying the conversation as we go. Please, if you guys have any questions or comments, put them in the comment section. We'll be happy to answer them. And if you have anything specifically for Tina, just put them in the comments. We got you. So now you got that treatment, you got the hysterectomy, and this is the part where I have to ask, when leading up to the passing of Mark, walk us through that journey.
So we wanted to relocate to Virginia. We had lived in Pennsylvania to raise our children, but the idea of returning to Virginia was the dream. And to that regards, we had started working on obtaining jobs in Virginia because we wanted to relocate. Mark actually was able to secure a job in Virginia first, and he was supposed to take the job in September. But when my cancer started to look like uterine cancer, he postponed starting the job till November 1st. So I had a complete hysterectomy, literally like something happened, and within 48 hours, I was having a complete hysterectomy. And they're recovering in the facility and then home. Mark left November 1st to relocate to Virginia. We secured a 1-bedroom apartment for him there, and he was coming home as the process worked out. It was the first week of March. I was supposed to travel for work, and I could just sense God saying, you need to cancel that trip. And it was Very unusual, but I have learned from me to be able to hear when I feel like God is talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I canceled the trip. It wasn't something I'd ever done before. So my supervisor understood this and we were able to do it virtually. And then after that, I just heard God saying, you really need to spend time with Mark. And in my mind, I was thinking, I'm going to see him for Easter. I don't really feel like driving to Virginia, but I just kept hearing that pressing feeling of spending time with him. So he was living in Virginia. And if your wife calls and says, do you want to get together? What is any man going to say? Where, what time, what we doing, where we
Exactly.
at?
Exactly.
So we met in Delaware, which was in a midway point from where I was still living in Pennsylvania and where he was in Virginia. And anybody that's in a relationship, sometimes when you have to drive and you've gotten to see each other, you may be a little funky because you just had to drive, get everything together. Nothing. We had a wonderful time when we got together. In fact, we even got lost driving around and trying to find some place, not a bickering in it at all. We just laughed it off. We went out to eat. We went to the movies, and he was complaining of gas. And he had been to a medical facility when he was in Virginia, and they had given him some medication for it. And he was just expecting for it to take its course over time.
Mm-hmm.
After the day events, we were back in the hotel and he just didn't look well. It didn't look like what he was taking was really giving him the relief that he needed. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, did he want to go to the hospital and go see a doctor? And what do men say when someone...
No.
Exactly.
Look, I'd be the first one to tell you, no, I'm not going to see no doctor. I'll put some duct tape on it to keep it moving.
And he said no. And I was like, we've had a really good time this weekend. I don't want to end our trip with me nagging him to go to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So I just let it go. And I went back he was in the bathroom just sweating and just trying to catch his breath. And I went back to the bed where I was sitting and I heard a very loud noise. And I came in and he was laying on the floor. And there was a lot of blood everywhere. And I know how to operate in an emergency situation, but in my mind, he had hit his nose, and you're not supposed to turn someone over because you don't know what further damage can happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm someplace in the middle of Delaware. I called to the front desk and I let them know that my husband has fallen, he's hurt, and we need emergency care. We're on a military base. So the medics come and they are strapped with military gear and weapons. And they're asking me who I am, and I'm telling them. And they made me leave the room. He was not responsive. I was at the end of the hallway, losing my mind. I was screaming. I was distressed. I was calling different people. And in my mind, I could not conceive that this is how our story was going to end. I kept saying, I remember talking to my oldest sister, telling her, I love him. And in my mind, if I loved him, how could that had to be the cloak of covering and protection. Mm-hmm. Stuff like this happens to other people that are not in good relationships or something's dysfunctional, not to people that are happy and content with their lives. And they eventually take him to the hospital, and one of the medics or MPs led me to where they took him, and I had to drive behind him. And when I first got there, I had to identify who he was and give information. And I was in the waiting room. And then eventually someone told me to go into a private room. And at that moment, I knew that this wasn't good, that they were not going to talk to me in public, that they wanted to talk to me privately. And I was trying to role play in my mind, okay, I'm going to have to take off of work for a few weeks. I'm going to nurse him back to health. I'm starting to think about the things that I need to do to prepare to be there for my husband. And when the doctor came in, he told me that my husband had a massive heart attack. And I'm not a medical professional, so what does massive mean? And if I recall correctly, he said about 75 to 85% of his heart instantly stopped working. And so now that made sense to me why he fell, because if your blood is not circulating, your body doesn't have the capacity to stand. So when his heart stopped pumping blood to that level, him falling to the floor because the body couldn't operate. And he told me at that moment, we needed to see if we could just make it through the night. And I began to weep. And I remember having a sheet of paper that I was writing things on, and I was texting that to people to have information. And looking back at that picture, all the tears that were on there. And I asked him, make it through the night. And I told him about our children. And he said, yeah, you need to get your children here immediately. And at that time, my son was active duty in the Navy. And my sister had to contact Red Cross to get my son home. And I remember being in the first waiting room, and two of the doctors came, and they were talking so fast, and they were giving me all this information, and I wasn't able to keep up. And I finally told them, I want you to talk to me like your wife is the one in this situation, because I noticed that they both had on wedding bands. I said, I know you talk to a lot of people on a regular basis, but this is my husband. Mm-hmm. And I need you to care about him like it's your spouse. And they sort of stepped back and they repostured themselves and they approached me differently. They came to me with more compassion and they slowed down in their speech, giving me time to understand and ask questions. And one of the doctors actually was a physician that cared for Mark throughout that evening. And then I was moved to another waiting room. And I remember as I was walking and following the doctor, somebody was walking past me saying, I wonder what we're going to have for dinner and lunch. And I wondered in my mind, when would I ever be concerned with frivolous things like that? Because I had a sense that my life was taking a huge shift and it would never be the same. And they eventually had me in a waiting room, and they told me that eventually they would allow me to see Mark. And I remember sitting in that waiting room, and I kept hearing code such and such, and a lot of people running and scrambling around. And I was in there longer than they said that I was. And I was like, Tina, that is Mark. That is Mark that they are working on. And two people came into the room. I want to say it was two nurses, and they asked who I was, and I just became unconsolable. And they were like, no, we're not here to tell you something like that. We just wanted to check on you because we know that you've been in here longer than anticipated. And I asked them every time that I was hearing this coding going on, what did that mean? And they confirmed that it was my husband that they were trying to stabilize. And one of the doctors that was with me in the beginning of this came into the room. And at this point, he now is realizing that this is my husband. And he got down on his knees and he's put his hand on my knee. And he said, he told me how many different times Mark had coded. It was over double digits, like 12, 13 to 15 times. And he said, I know that you guys had a do not resuscitate and you have a living will. And he asked me, what did I want to have done? And at that time, I was actually on the phone with one of our children. And they said, Daddy would not want to live like that, because now we had gone from maybe 11 o'clock in the afternoon until now 7 p.m. The amount of oxygen that was not in his brain and what would be remaining of him is something that needed to be considered. And before I had to say anything, another doctor came in and said that he was gone. And I wanted to see him immediately, but they had to remove some of the things that they had on him, the apparatuses, trying to keep him alive. And I remember going in, and until this point, I had never touched a dead body at all. But when I went into that room and saw him there, he looked fine. He looked at peace. And I laid on that table with him and lost my mind. I remember holding his hand, and his hand was cold. And I was thinking this was the same hand that was touching me less than 24 hours ago. And I screamed and I cried. And I appreciate the staff not coming in and trying to scoop me off of the floor, that they allowed me to do whatever I needed to do. They only came in one time to tell me that my daughter had entered the hospital and she was on her way up. And that allowed me to get myself together. So when my daughter came, she literally didn't see me in that state. And it was difficult. It was extremely difficult. There were family and friends coming because we were in Delaware. So we weren't close to anybody. People were coming from Virginia. People were coming from Pennsylvania because they had been informed that Mark had died and I was there by myself.
Thank you. Thank you for that. You know, that right there, just, I don't wish that on anyone.
I do not either.
We both know what that feels like, right? You know, and then when you was talking about the coding, and man, it took me back to a place of remembering something very similar, you know, with my son. And, you know, that code 4 or code blue is what they call it. Code
Okay.
blue, you know, and you see all of these people running. And so when you were saying that, I was like, man, I can definitely, I'm right there with you. Right.
Yes.
And I'm seeing all of these things going on, and as you're saying it, my heart is just hurting because I'm in that space with you, you know, and it's just like, man, we get it though. I think that's what makes us who we are though nowadays, right? You know, so now you've had the before, you've had the during. How long did it take after that before you began the process of healing? Because the grieving process is hard. The healing process is hard. So let's walk us, you know, what did that grieving process, what was it like to you? You know, was it very supportive? Because everybody's different. And the reason why I asked that, because, you know, when you talk to most people, they're like, yeah, you know, people left out of my life. People, you know, there was people that stayed, but then there was people that said stupid stuff to me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? You know, and I get it. I think we all get it. What was that process like for you?
My process, I know, is unique to the average person. The same level of support and care that I had with breast cancer was the same level of support and care that I've had in Mark's death, and even more so. I did not lose a single friend. I did not have anybody abandon me. If anything else, more people that knew me became part of that tribe that were going to lift me up. And I am beyond grateful for that. Actually, on March 11th will be 7 years since Mark has died. And the first time that I started seeing a therapist was the Friday before I saw Mark's body. And another widow contacted me and she reached out to provide me. She said, I've already contacted my therapist. She will see you and you can contact her immediately. And I called her immediately because when we were having children, I read this book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. When you're getting married, you read these books or have premarital counseling. I needed to understand what life would look like without Mark. I was not going to just scoot along with this and figure it out. There had to be some way to get healthy coping skills. There had to be a way to approach this in which I would come out on the other side of this and not be stuck, feeling like every day was the first day that he died. I know forever it will be part of my life, but I didn't need to be in that place of deep remorse and depression and denial. So my approach to handling Mark's death was straight on and forward, just like I do to so many other different things in life. And I started seeing a therapist. I started reaching out to every widow that I knew, and I spent time with them. Whether I could be in their presence personally or we could be over the phone. I wanted them to tell me how they endured this. I wanted them to tell me the things that only widows whisper to each other and they wouldn't tell other people. was now part of a club that nobody wanted to be a part of, but yet there are so many part of it. And me creating community and reaching out, me contacting my siblings. At that point in time, I had 2 siblings on the West Coast and 2 on the East Coast. So I was talking to somebody 24 hours a day. I was not allowing grief to mute me. I was able to talk to somebody at work. I was able to talk to somebody at home. It was still my individual road to walk. It was still my pain to carry, but being able to give some of that to friends and family to carry for me made it a little bit lighter. One of the things that I remember is after Mark died, that I didn't have anything to give to my children. And I regret that I was at a place of such a deficit that I was working on my own healing, that I didn't have anything extra to give to them. And about 6 months after Mark's passing, I began to communicate more with our children. And I apologize. I know it was their dad that passed. So at this point, their dad had died, and then their mother was dysfunctional for the most part. Yeah. And for them to feel like they had lost both parents, that made it more difficult for them. But we had a very heart-to-heart conversation. We spent Christmas together and talked about our hurts and our pains and how difficult it was with their dad's absence, because he was a good man. Mark was at their soccer games. He was involved. He was a good father. And his absence from this world was devastating. And we had to walk ourselves into that process. So for me, as you talk about, I wasn't mad at God, but showing up in places that we spent together was difficult to be there in his absence. So I started visiting different churches. I hung out with different friends, recultivated some different relationships. And I can tell you, on top of all of that, unfortunately, I drank more whiskey sours in that first year than my liver probably wanted to remember. But it wasn't something that I did on the long term, but in all transparency, it was part of the process. And I want to say about 9 months to 18 months out, I started to come out of what is, people hear the term a grief fog. But when you have the death of a loved one, your prefrontal cortex is literally impacted by that trauma. Mm-hmm. And your coping skills, the thing that you have impulse control, your problem solving skills, your planning, those processes in your prefrontal cortex are reduced. And then in your amygdala, that part of your brain takes over, which is your fight and flight, which is a very reactionary. So some people say, I didn't act like myself when I was grieving. The body has a planned reaction in dealing with trauma. And that is why we feel that grief fog, why we have very difficulty remembering different things, and we're not able to show up in life. I did not return to work for 3 months. I had a very high profile job, and I didn't have the capacity to sit in a board meeting and care about what people were thinking about graphs. I didn't care, and I needed to give myself space to get myself ready to be able to reacclimate to the world and what were problems. I remember being emotionally distracted and driving and missing an exit off the highway and then having to resettle myself. But what I didn't do, I didn't beat myself up about that. I told myself, I have loved a wonderful man for 32 years, and the process of untangling myself from him and identifying myself as an individual would take time. It was times where I just would say Tina and Mark, because I never had said my name alone for so long that I had to unpack that process.
Wow. I love that, because you walk through a whole process. And I think, when you break it down the way that you went through it, it actually says a lot of light. Especially with the statement. Lakaya, thank you for tuning in as always. Thank you for your support, and thank you for that statement up here. I'm gonna put this up here. You tell me what you think about this, and also thank you, Lakaya, for your vulnerability and sharing that with us. So tell me what you think about this. Lakaya says, she goes, I'm listening, and your story just brought tears to my eyes because I went through something similar, and I don't wish that on anyone.
Lakaya, I don't wish it on anyone, But at the same time, I kind of do. And this is the reason why. When we get married and we make these vows, we say till death do us part. I much rather our relationship have ended that Mark died organically than us having a divorce. But what we don't think about is that is what we sign up for in a relationship, to part this world in the love of somebody else. Is which what drove me to reading a lot of books about losing a loved one, to understand mentally, physically, and spiritually how that impacts me. In the tears, I hope they are healing tears for you. I hope those tears recount beautiful memories of the person that you love. And I say love because you still love them now. And that it is well in your soul as you go through that process. Because to have someone that we would love so much, that would impact our life so much, is a wonderful gift that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to enjoy in this world.
I love that you said that, and it made me actually think about it. Right, like as much as we hear people say, "I don't wish that on anyone." And very rarely you hear the opposite side of it. But when you broke it down, it made total sense. Till death do us part. We always think about the life. We never think about the death. And when you take that and put it and generalize it into a broader spectrum, we don't think about death.
No.
We do now, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, of course, well, I mean, because we're around those, you know what I'm saying? Like you said, we've had to join clubs that no one wanted to be a part of, but now here we are, right? But when you get into it, you see how common, how common it is across the board.
Yes.
Right. And then you're thinking to yourself, like, all of this was going on behind the scenes and I knew nothing about this.
You think about so many people who have lost loved ones. I've heard this thing. It's different when you're sitting in the front row of the funeral. When you're in the back and you may be upset, but your life is not wrecked. Your life is not literally upheavaled and redirected and traumatized. It is a difference.
There's a big difference. And I love the fact that you were talking about the grief fog. I just posted something on social media about the brain fog aspect of it, and everybody's different. I mean, mine was 2 years. There was 2 years. I couldn't tell you what happened. Maybe a little bit longer, right? I know I had a routine. I knew that I made sure that the bills was taken care of. I know I had food in the house, but I couldn't tell you about a conversation that I had. I couldn't tell you about a place that I went to. I couldn't tell you what I did during that time. And the scary part about it is that I was driving trash truck at the time. I couldn't tell you what any of my routes looked like. I really couldn't. I couldn't. The people who were with me and things like, luckily I had some good people with me that was, friends of mine that had been with me with my son. And then, when my son passed, as well as my mother. And so luckily those people were there, but I don't think they even knew what was going on with me. Right. And I didn't know what was going on with me neither. Right. Because I had never, for somebody like myself and others that can relate to this, I never heard the term grief. I heard the term mourn.
Yes.
I never heard the term grief. I never heard the term brain fog. I always heard you just crazy. Right? You know what I'm saying? You just absent-minded.
Yes.
Right? You know what I'm saying? We was taught, hey, these things happen. It's time to get back out there again. Just because this happened, the world don't stop moving. Those bills still need to be paid. So I never knew any of these things. I never knew what generational trauma was. I never understood childhood trauma for the most part, right? And I think when you see somebody pass away, you kind of watch everyone else around you. Now, what I didn't understand, and I later on found out, through my own process, the mask that people put on, which allows them to hide what's really going on with them. It allows them to not burden other people about what's going on with them. And I think that's, the when we think about it, I think we all understand that aspect of it as well. Because we don't want to be a burden to people. We don't want people to feel that pain that we carry around with us. But on the other side of it, there's people out there that are going, no, you don't understand. I want to be a part of this, right? I want to walk with you. And it sounds, when you tell your story, it sounds like you did have those individuals that walked there. You were, even going through the brain fog and, all of these different facets that came along with your process. Now, when was it the deciding factor when you say, you know what, I'm going to take this and, I'm going to help others like my other women out there, like myself? When did you change your mind over and said, you know what, I'm gonna serve. I'm gonna change this into a place of servitude, or a journey of servitude?
Can I circle back to something you said before I answer that question? Yeah. You are right. I have learned that people that are living life with us, they want to help us. They don't know how to jump in and help us. And I want to encourage you that if you have lost a loved one and you have disassociated from family and friends, they love you most likely. And they're hanging on the outside trying to figure out how they can help. It could have been a year, 2, 3 years from now. In fact, the longer you disassociate, the easier it becomes to isolate yourself, and you become lonely and you still want help. I told my family and friends, this is horrible. This is horrible. This is horrible at 2:00 in the morning. And I gave them all the receipts. And they came in and asked what could they do, if they could rake the leaves, if they could pick up groceries. I told them, you have the ability to reach in and do the things that you know I need to have done. And on the 1-year anniversary of Mark's death, I went back to that same hotel where he had the heart attack, and I stayed, because every time I would drive past that, it would just paralyze me with fear and anxiety, and I could not have more power over me than myself. And at a year mark, I started telling my family and friends, I don't remember a lot that happened. Where were you when you found out? And they started telling me their version of their life when Mark died. They would have never said that to me if I didn't ask, because they wouldn't want to appear that their experience of the death of my husband was worthy of talking about and compared to my story. But when I gave them permission, they shared how Mark's death impacted them, where they were when they got the phone call, what they did. And it also allowed me to know, really, I was not alone in this journey. They were equally impacted in their own way. And that allowed them to be more comfortable to tell me stories about Mark that I didn't know, because he had friendships with other people and interactions. And it gave that peace and space to be able to talk, to say his name, because I wanted to hear his name out loud, as I still do today. So that has been encouraging. And everybody may not know how to sit with you, but there may be a few that once you guide them and give them permission, that they will be on this journey with you. The point where it became turning what I'm doing into helping others, I will say I did get remarried in February of 2022. And my current husband had a cousin who passed. And he was able to go to the funeral, but for other reasons, I was not. But I eventually met the widow, and it was his cousin's birthday. And I saw the post, and I reached out to her, and I said, hey, I wanted to say hi. I know this is a difficult time. And she said, well, I'll call you tomorrow. And I said, but do you want to call me now? And I think no sooner than I hit now, she called me immediately. And it was about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And we were on the phone till about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Your girl go to sleep at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, or I'm like, I'm cross-eyed, and I'm like, what are we? But I was alert, I was awake, because I knew so many other widows were on the other side of that phone And they told me and validated my feelings. They confirmed what I was going through was normal. They normalized my grief. And that was my opportunity to show up for somebody else. I'd had other opportunities where I showed up for widows, but that point in time was a sacrifice. I needed to get up and go to work the next day, but I was not going to get off that phone until she felt like she was ready to get off that phone. And when I got off the phone, I could hear guys saying, "So what are you going to do with the next person?" And I was like, "What next person? Ain't nobody picking up this phone because I'm going to sleep." But God was just really just showing me and reminded me how many people go through this and they are alone. And I said, okay, what am I supposed to do? And that was the genesis of Widowhood Real Talk with Tina being birthed from that conversation and leaning in to serve other people. And with the same comfort that I've received, to give them the same comfort in their journey.
That is truly amazing. And again, thank you for the work that you do and to shedding light on that journey. For everyone out there that can relate to that, Tina's right. You're not by yourself, and hopefully this gives you some inspiration. So what's next for Tina?
I have that conversation with his cousin, and I lean into this process like I lean into everything else intentionally. We started Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, which is a registered 501c3 nonprofit. And I say that because sometimes people say I have a nonprofit. And it's like, but do you though? And it's like, did you really establish a real organization and put things in place? And so we did that. We have board members, and Widowhood Real Talk with Tina evolved into supporting people in 3 different lanes. And the first lane is through social media. It's interesting that we just came out of a pandemic and still dealing with different things as it relates to COVID. But our world has lost so many souls, and so many people have lost loved ones without the ability to grieve them according to their normal traditions. They weren't able to even be in the room when their loved one died. People have had to relocate because of lack of employment or financial reasons, and they have shown up in new areas with that mask that you talk about, because people don't know their backstory. They don't know that they may have lost a loved one. All they know is such and such is here new on the job and they're starting, and they don't know anything else about them. But when they leave that job and they go home, they're staring at the walls. They're devastated because they have masked all day and they're exhausted when they get home. And where do we go? Social media. Exactly. So between our weekly podcasts, we have social content across 6 different platforms: LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X. And you'll see content that provides hope, healing, and encouragement, because we need to know we're not alone. We need to know that there are other people that have been through the experience we've endured, and we have the capacity to be able to survive this and still have a life that thrives. The second way in which we support people is through resources. We provide books on how to manage grief. We connect people with therapists or grief coaches. I do provide grief coach services. And the third way is through different events. We have an event in August called Walk for Love, where we ask people to walk for 1 mile for 7 days. And the reason why we do that is when you are grieving, as we spoke about, you isolate yourself, you become recluse. But being able to come outside to walk 1 mile is usually not very aggressive, and people can usually do that. They get some vitamin D. We ask people to post a hashtag. There's a fundraiser element of that to purchase our shirts, and to be able to walk that 1 mile and see people from Singapore, Jamaica, around the world posting. Another element of knowing you are not alone and there are other people on this journey with you. We also have a monthly support group, where one group on the second Thursday of the month is strictly for men, because men, as you know, need their own space to manage their grief. And we have a support group on the last Thursday of the month that I have open to male and females. And we have an event called Dealing with Grief During the Holidays. And then at the end of the year, we have Surviving the Winter Holiday in-person dinner. We also allow different organizations to become sponsors. We have a silver, bronze, and gold level sponsorship that can donation, and it shows the different ways in which we promote their organization, because our podcast and social content has about over 3 million views and has been seen in 78 different countries. So for businesses that are looking to sponsor something with mental health, there's an opportunity for your company to be seen literally worldwide and also provide help for people's mental wellness.
Man, you make me feel like I don't work hard enough. I got to get back to the drawing board again. And you know what? Somebody out there is going to be listening to that like the boy already don't sleep. Did y'all just hear what she said? No, look, I feel like I'm slacking. I'm gonna have to get back out there. I'm gonna have to start. Look, I got to do some more work.
Where you're at, I'm trying to be at your level.
Hey, you know what? I look at it like this, right? With the work that we do, it doesn't matter where we at as long as we keep progressing.
Yes.
Right. You know what I'm saying? With the goal of servitude to others. It's not a competition.
Not at all.
It's not. It's a collaboration. It takes all of us together to be able to do the work that we're supposed to do. And that's just the bottom line of it, right? Because as we both know, as we understand, it's not about us anymore.
At all.
It's about the people that we touch. It's about how we leave people, right? You know what I'm saying? And it's about showing up and being there and letting people know that, hey, I see you.
Yes.
Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you will allow me and give me the privilege to walk with you in your place of need, I promise I won't, I'll visit with you. And I'll leave when you don't need me anymore. But if you allow me this moment with you, I will walk with you in humility and holiness, and out of respect. And I think that's what it's all about when we talk about the work that we do. And for anybody else out there, if you're looking for support in these general areas, please go check out. I have her links down below, so those things are out there. Now, I'm gonna just have her just let you know where to find her. Where can people find you?
You can find us at widowhoodrealtalkwithtina.org, and from there are links to all of our social media accounts. If you have your journey that you want to share on my podcast, you can put an invitation to be a guest on the podcast, or maybe there are different topics that you would like to cover. One thing I would like to say is, I know I've mentioned that my faith is the catalyst for me doing what I do. That is not what Widowhood Real Talk with Tina is a foundation or limited to. A person's faith, their sexual orientation, who they are, or ethnicity, none of those things are barriers. When your person dies, those things go out of the window. You want someone that can sit there with you, love on you, and support you. My faith only comes up when someone asks me my personal story and my journey, but I am here to serve the world. Unfortunately, we have too many people that are grieving. That probably is not enough for Tony, myself, and other people that are in this grief work to even help. So I want you to be clear that my job, that I know my assignment is to show up with you and be on this journey, how I can help and encourage you along the way.
I always ask people this. I always ask my guests, if you can leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
Thank you for that question. Oftentimes we hear the 5 or 6 stages of grief, that we hear about what those things are. Am I at acceptance? Am I in denial? And we're always trying to assess what our grief is. Mm-hmm. Those things happen in 5 minutes. It's not something that happens this week. I'm at acceptance, and this week that I'm in denial. They could all happen in a matter of seconds. The
Mm.
thing is, what do you do when you're in this process? And I
Yeah.
want to leave you with three things that I know have been proven helpful since I've been working with people on this journey. The first one is to assess your unique needs and your emotions. Check in with yourself and see how you're feeling.
Mm.
Unlock your own reflection internally. And then number two, express your emotions and your desires to your community. Your community may just be your journal because you may not be at a place that you can talk and trust other people with your thoughts. But
Mm.
getting it out of yourself and writing it down is powerful. Maybe your therapist is part of your community. Maybe you have trusted friends or family. But whatever that community is, express what your needs are. And then number three, work on fulfilling what your needs are and moving forward. And that will allow you to continually going through your grief journey. I don't want to say that you're going to ever be over grief. You just will house it differently. And I want you to know that the price of loving someone, it shows up when they're absent in your grief. And that is perfectly normal.
Wow, that was thank you. Thank you for that. I couldn't have said it any better, man. And I want to say thank you again, being on the show, sharing your journey with us. Such a powerful journey. As you already know, you've already moved a few people. I'm pretty sure there's a few other people over here that had those tears in their eyes, and I was going along with you, and I was just like, man, that I'm right there with you. I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. So again, thank you for being on the show today. Um, and I look forward to having many more conversations with you. And as I said before, people, go over and check out her podcast. Check out her links if you guys are looking for service. Don't try to do this alone. As I said before, and I'll say it again, we always have something for someone that's out there. So there's genuine people that want to walk with you and show up with you, that want to speak life and love over top of you.
Yes.
But most of all, that want to be a part of your healing process. So don't be afraid to ask for that help. But unless you ask for the help, we don't know. Now, with that being said, this is going to conclude this episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Now, before I take off, if you've made it this far, do me a favor, head over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And if you know someone who can benefit from these conversations that we have, please share this with them. And until next time, before I take off, I got one more thing I have to ask now, because we have a few things coming up here. So I want to give a huge shout out. There's a surviving sibling summit that's coming up in April, I believe, with Maya. Reach out to her. Be sure to check that out. Be sure to check out the up and coming Global Grief Conference this year, as well as Jay Lewis and Kate Mollison. They do have the Happily Never After podcast coming out as well. They will be on the show next week, as well as we have a few other people that are coming. So you guys stay tuned for all of those different things that are coming out, and we'll keep you guys informed. I'm gonna have Tina's information up there, so you guys go up there and check out, because I know she always has some things going on. She makes me feel like I'm a rookie in this thing over here, and I'm okay with that. But other than that, you guys, thank you for putting up with us. Thank you for your support. Thank you for just tuning in and lasting this long with us. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. Tina, thank you again. For everyone else, you guys have a great day. I love you. Peace.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.